License and registration, please. What's the problem, officer? You ran a red light. License and registration.
I like yellow. This is harassment. Sir, step out of the car.
License and registration. Now. Officer, I wasn't doing anything. Step out of the car. Hands where I can see them. This is ridiculous. I know my rights. Out. Now.
Rain tapped against the windshield in fast, nervous beats. Marcus Reed kept both hands on the steering wheel. 10 and 2. Always 10 and 2. Red and blue lights exploded behind him. His chest tightened. Already, he whispered. He wasn't speeding. He knew he wasn't. He pulled over slowly. Turn signal on. Engine off. Window halfway down. Boot stepped into the rain. A flashlight hit his face. Too bright. Too long. License and registration. Marcus nodded. Yes, officer. He moved slowly toward his wallet. Slowly. The officer snapped. I am. The beam slid across the leather seats. The dashboard. The watch on Marcus's wrist. This your car? Yes, sir. A pause. Step out. Marcus blinked. May I ask why? The officer leaned closer. Rain ran down the brim of his hat. You people always got a question. The words landed hard. Cars passed. Some slowed. Marcus stepped out. The cold hit his skin. What did I do? He asked. The officer didn't answer. Instead, he said quietly, let's see if you're who you say you are. Marcus felt something shift. Not just fear. Something worse. And when he saw the second cruiser turn the corner, he knew this wasn't just a traffic stop. Rain slid down the windshield in sharp lines. Marcus Reed kept both hands on the wheel. 10 and 2. He checked the speedometer. 35. Exactly the limit. Red and blue lights flashed behind him. His stomach dropped. He pulled over carefully. Signal first. Smooth stop. Engine off. He rolled the window halfway down. Cold air rushed in. Boots splashed through puddles. A flashlight hit his eyes. Bright. Blinding. License and registration. The voice was flat. Marcus nodded. Yes, officer. He reached slowly into his jacket. Slowly. The officer repeated. I am. His fingers felt heavy. He handed over the documents. The officer didn't take them right away. Instead, he studied Marcus's face. Longer than necessary. This your vehicle? Yes, sir. You sure about that? Marcus blinked. Yes. The officer leaned back slightly. What do you do for work? Marcus hesitated. He hated this part. I'm an attorney. A small laugh. Uh-huh. The officer finally took the license. He glanced at it. Marcus Reed, he read slowly. That you? Yes. The officer looked at the car interior again. Leather seats. Clean dashboard. Silver watch. You were driving suspiciously. Marcus swallowed. In what way? You were swerving. I wasn't. You calling me a liar? No, sir. I'm asking what I did. The officer's jaw tightened. Step out of the vehicle. Marcus's pulse ticked his ears. Am I being detained? I said step out. Cars slowed as they passed. Marcus opened the door slowly and stepped into the rain. Cold drops soaked through his shirt. He kept his hands visible. Stand by the hood. Marcus did. The officer circled the car. Slow steps. Intentional. Marcus could feel eyes on him from passing vehicles. He hated that feeling, like being displayed. Where are you coming from? The officer asked. Work. Where's that? Downtown. Doing what? I told you. I'm an attorney. The officer stopped walking. What kind? Civil rights. Silence. The rain grew louder. The officer's expression changed. Not surprise. Recognition. Oh, he said quietly. Marcus felt it. The shift. The officer stepped closer. Civil rights, he repeated. Yes. Interesting. A second cruiser turned the corner. Marcus's chest tightened. I didn't call for, he began. The officer cut him off. Backup's routine. The second car parked behind the first. Another officer stepped out. Younger. Watching carefully. What's the issue? The younger one asked. Possible match, the first officer said. Marcus looked up. Match to what? The first officer ignored him. You fit the description. Of who? Marcus asked. The younger officer shifted his weight. The first officer spoke slowly. Black male, mid-30s, nice car. Marcus felt heat rise in his neck. That's not a description, he said. It is tonight. The younger officer avoided eye contact. Marcus looked at him instead. Officer, what crime? The first officer's tone sharpened. Watch your tone. I'm asking question. And I'm telling you to stand still. A car stopped across the street. A woman stepped out with her phone raised. Recording. The first officer noticed. His jaw flexed. You mind your business, he shouted toward her. She didn't lower the phone. Marcus felt the moment changing. Not safer, just louder. The first officer walked back to him. You got anything in the vehicle I should know about? No. Mind if I take a look? Yes, I mind. Do you have probable cause? The younger officer inhaled sharply. The first officer's eyes narrowed. You lawyers think you know everything. I know my rights. The rain slowed to a drizzle, but the tension thickened. The first officer stepped very close. Close enough that Marcus could smell coffee on his breath. You always got to make things difficult? Marcus held eye contact. I'm not the one escalating this. A pause. Heavy. The first officer stepped back. He spoke into his radio quietly. Marcus couldn't hear the words, but he saw the glance. The look, not suspicion. Decision. The officer turned back. You know, he said slowly, there was a theft nearby. Marcus's stomach dropped. What does that have to do with me? The officer's eyes locked onto his. Let's see if you're who you say you are. And when the third cruiser's lights appeared in the distance, Marcus understood. This wasn't about traffic. It was about something else. And it was only getting started. The rain slid down the windshield in sharp lines. Too close. Marcus too deliberate. Kept both hands Marcus on the wheel. Felt the space around 10 and 2. 3 officers now. 35 sets of eyes. Exactly the first officer. Red and blue lights didn't look rushed anymore. His stomach dropped. Settled. He pulled over carefully. The younger officer stood smooth, slightly behind. Engine off. Quiet. He rolled the window halfway down. The third officer stayed near the door. Boots splashed resting near his belt. A flashlight. Marcus kept his hands visible. Rain dripped from his license and registration. You said theft. The voice was said flat. Evenly. Marcus nodded. Was stolen? Yes, officer. Hayes ignored the question. He reached slowly into his jacket. Where were you at 7:15? Slowly. Driving home. Officer repeated. From where? I am. Downtown. His fingers felt heavy. He handed over the documents. Alone. The officer didn't tilt his head away. No witnesses. Instead, he studied Marcus's face. Blinked. Longer than driving home? This your vehicle? Hayes stepped closer. Yes, sir. You matched the description. You sure about that? You said that. Marcus blinked. What description? Yes. Hayes flipped open the officer leaned back slightly. Didn't look at it. What do you do for work? Black male. Marcus hesitated. He hated this part. Nice I'm an attorney. Marcus stared at him. That describes half the city. The officer finally took not half the city driving this car. He glanced at it. Marcus again. He read slowly. The assumption. That's you. Marcus inhaled slowly. The officer looked at the car interior again. Hayes' jaw leather seats. Electronics. Clean dashboard. High-end. Silver watch. Marcus felt driving implication slide in. Unspoken. Marcus swallowed. Heavy. In what way? So now my car is evidence? You were swerving. Marcus asked. I wasn't. You're asking calling me a liar? Because you're giving none. I'm asking what I did. The third officer shifted. The officer's jaw run his ID yet? Step out of the vehicle. Hayes looked down at Marcus's pulse ticked his ears. Marcus read. Am I being detained? He said slowly. He mispronounced step out. Read. Car slowed as Marcus corrected him. Marcus opened the door slowly and stepped into the rain. Hayes smirked. Cold drops soaked through his shirt. The younger officer looked uncomfortable. Stand by the hood. Walked back to his cruiser. Marcus did. Marcus stood alone under the streetlight. Car slowed. A phone camera still pointing Marcus could feel eyes on him. Feel the story forming. He hated that feeling. Like his body was becoming a headline. Where are you coming from? The radio crackled inside the cruiser. Word. Static. Where's murmured that? Voices. Downtown. The younger officer stepped closer to Marcus. I told you. You live nearby? He asked quietly. The officer stopped walking. You ever been stopped before? Civil rights. Marcus held his gaze. Silence. Yes. The rain grew louder. The younger officer swallowed. Officer's expression changed. For what? Not surprised. Existing. Recognition. A small silence. Oh, he said quietly. The younger officer Marcus felt away first. The shift. Hayes stepped back. Officer stepped closer. His expression had changed. He repeated. He walked slower now. More measured. A second cruiser Hayes turned corner. Marcus moved chest immediately. I didn't call for. he began. For a quick pat down, officer cut him off. For what reason? Backup routine. Officer safety. The second car parked. Marcus felt heat in his chest. Another officer standing still, younger, hands visible, watching carefully. No weapon. What's the issue? You're refusing? I'm asking for cause. The first officer's voice sharpened. Marcus looked. You don't get to question match my cause. To what? I do when it involves my body. You fit the description. The third officer stepped closer. Don't make this harder than it has to be. The younger officer shifted his weight. Marcus looked from one face to the next slowly. 3 uniforms. Black male. 3 badges. 3 guns. He raised his arms slowly. Rise in his fine. That's not a patted him down, he said. Rough. It is tonight. Too rough. The younger officer avoided eye contact. Checking Marcus looked at him instead. Nothing. Officer, what crime? Nervous? The first officer's tone sharpened. I should watch your tone. Hayes leaned near his ear. People get telling you to stand still. Usually have something to hide. A car stopped across the street. Marcus didn't respond. A woman stepped out with her phone raised. No weapon. Recording, he said flatly. The first officer The radio noticed. Inside the jaw flexed. Crackled again. You mind your business. Hayes walked back toward her. He shouted toward her. The younger officer She didn't lower the phone. You said Marcus civil rights? Felt the moment change. The younger officer asked Not safer. Softly. Yes. Just louder. What first officer walked back to him. And Alvarez. You got anything in the vehicle? The younger officer's eyebrows lifted slightly. Mind if I take recognition? Before he could speak, do you have probable cause? His expression was different officer now. Inhaled not sharply. Suspicion. The first something officer's eyes narrowed. Personal. You lawyer's name was Marcus Reed. I know my rights. The rain slowed to a drizzle. You file lawsuits, but the tension thickened. The Marcus held his gaze. Stepped very close. Yes. Close enough that Marcus like this smell coffee on his breath. Air shifted. You always got to Marcus didn't answer immediately. Marcus I represent clients. I'm not the one escalating this. Hayes gave a humorless laugh. Heavy. Oh, I know you do. First officer stepped back. The younger officer spoke into his radio quietly. Hayes took one step Marcus couldn't hear the words. You think you're better than us? But he saw the glance. No. The look. You think with the enemy? Suspicion. Decision. I think accountability matters. Officer turned back. Hayes' eyes hardened. He said slowly. Accountability. There was a theft nearby. The word sounded wrong in his mouth. What does that have to do with me? Hayes said slowly. The officer's eyes locked on his. What? Let's see Hayes stepped in closer. And when the third misconduct case appeared in the distance, Marcus understood. Pulse spiked. This wasn't about traffic. He didn't deny it. It was about something else. The third officer looked up. It was only getting started. That you? He asked Hayes quietly. Hayes didn't break eye contact. Yeah, that's him. The silence that followed was thick. Personal now, not procedural. Hayes folded his arms. So you sue officers, he said, then drive around in a car like this. Marcus felt the trap forming. That case involved excessive force. Marcus replied calmly. Hayes' voice dropped. You make good cops look bad. If they're good, evidence protect them. Hayes' jaw clenched. The younger officer shifted again. Uncertain, Hayes suddenly reached for his cuffs. Metal clicked. Turn around, he said. Marcus blinked. For what? For officer safety. I've done nothing. Hayes' voice rose. Turn around. The woman across the street zoomed her phone in closer. The third officer looked uneasy. Hayes, he muttered. Hayes ignored him. Marcus stood still. Rain dripped from his chin. Are you arresting me? Marcus asked. Not yet. Then why cuffs? Hayes stepped in close again. Because I can. The words were quiet, but sharp. The younger officer inhaled. Sir, he started. Maybe we? Turn around. Hayes snapped again. Marcus's heart pounded. He thought of every client who had stood exactly like this, powerless in public, framed by flashing lights. He slowly turned. Cold metal circled his wrists. Tight, too tight. The click echoed louder than the rain. And as Hayes pulled him toward the cruiser, Marcus realized the stop was no longer about suspicion. It was about retaliation. And everyone watching could feel it. The rain slid down the windshield in sharp lines. Too tight. Marcus flexed his fingers, kept both hands on the wheel. Hayes held his arm firmly. He checked the speed. Not guiding. 35. Controlling. Exactly. Watch your step. Red and blue lights flashed Marcus almost laughed. His stomach dropped. The street light pulled over carefully. The woman across the road moved closer. Smooth stop. Still filming. Engine off. Why is he rolled the window halfway down. Hayes cold air rushed in. Stay back, splashed through puddles. A flashlight hit his eyes. Hayes opened the cruiser's blind door. License stopped registration. Am I under arrest? The voice was flat.
He asked again.
Marcus nodded.
Hayes didn't answer.
Yes, officer.
He pushed Marcus lightly
slowly
into
his
the
jacket. Marcus
Slowly.
caught himself before
The officer
stumbling.
repeated.
Humiliation burned deeper than fear.
His fingers felt
the
heavy.
younger officer
He handed
stepped
over
closer.
the documents.
Sir, the officer
Maybe we
didn't
should
take
clarify.
them right away.
Instead,
Instead,
he
he studied Marcus's
I'm
face.
clarifying now.
Longer than necessary.
Marcus sat inside
the
the
vehicle.
cruiser.
Plastic
Yes, sir.
seat.
Cold.
You sure about that?
The door stayed open.
Marcus blinked.
Rain drifted
Yes.
sideways.
The officer
You
leaned
said
back
theft.
slightly.
Marcus
What do you
said
do
calmly.
for work? What evidence
Marcus
links me to
hesitated.
it?
He hated
Hayes
this
leaned
part.
against the door
I'm an
frame.
attorney.
You fit.
A small laugh.
That's not evidence.
Uh-huh.
The
It's
officer
enough to
finally
check.
took the license.
Check what?
He glanced at it.
Hayes smirked.
Marcus Reed, your story.
He read slowly.
Marcus leaned
That
back
you?
slowly.
Yes.
My story is that I was
The
driving
officer
home.
looked at the car interior
Convenient.
again.
Leather
The
seats.
third officer
Clean
approached Hayes
dashboard.
quietly.
Silver
You
watch.
sure about this?
You
he
were
muttered.
driving
His
suspiciously.
voice stayed low but sharp.
Marcus swallowed.
He's the one.
In
suing
what
the
way?
department.
You
The
were
third
swerving.
officer glanced toward
I
Marcus.
wasn't. And
You calling me a liar?
And
People
no,
like
sir.
him don't get to bully
I'm
us.
asking what I did. Marcus heard that.
The officer's
Every
jaw
word.
tightened.
The younger
Step out of the
officer
vehicle.
stiffened.
That's
Marcus's
not what
pulse
this
ticked
is,
his ears.
he said softly.
Am I being detained?
Hayes turned toward him.
I said,
Then
what
step
is
out.
it?
Car
The younger
slowed as they
officer
passed.
hesitated.
Marcus
No
opened
answer
the door
came.
slowly.
Silence
and stepped
spread.
into the rain.
Marcus
Cold
looked at the crowd
drops soaked
forming
through his
now.
shirt.
He
Two more
kept his
people.
hands visible.
Phones raised.
Stand by the hood.
Headlights paused instead
Marcus
of passing.
did. The
He felt
officer
exposed.
circled the car.
Not because
Slow
he was
steps.
guilty.
Intentional.
He was visible.
Marcus could feel
Hayes
eyes on
stepped
him
closer
from passing
again.
vehicles.
You think cameras
He
protect
hated that
you?
feeling.
Like
Marcus
being
held his
displayed.
gaze. Where are you
They
coming
protect
from?
everyone.
The officer asked.
Hayes laughed once.
Work.
Short.
Where's that?
You file lawsuits.
Downtown. Hayes said.
Doing what?
You think you're changing
I told
the
you.
world.
I'm an attorney.
I'm trying to improve it.
The officer stopped
Hayes
walking.
leaned closer.
What kind?
You don't know what this job
Civil
costs.
rights.
Marcus's
Silence.
voice stayed.
The
even.
rain grew louder.
I know what it
The
costs. when it's
officer's
abused.
expression changed.
The words
Not
hung there.
surprise. Heavy.
Recognition. Hayes' jaw
Oh, he said
flexed.
quietly.
He stepped
Marcus
back.
felt it.
Search the
The shift.
vehicle. He
The
ordered.
officer stepped
The third
closer.
officer
Civil
hesitated.
rights.
Do
He
we
repeated.
have?
Yes.
Search it.
Interesting.
The younger officer
A
looked
second
torn,
cruiser
but he
turned the corner.
moved toward
Marcus's
Marcus's
car
chest
anyway.
tightened.
I
Marcus
didn't call
felt
for
his
it,
stomach
he
twist.
began.
The
Officer
cut him
he said
off
firmly.
Backup
You don't have probable cause.
The second car
Hayes
parked behind
ignored
the
him.
first. The
Another
younger
officer
officer
opened
opened
the
the
driver's
driver's
side
side
door.
door.
Watching
Rain hit the
carefully.
leather seats.
What's the issue?
He checked under the
younger
seat.
one asked.
The glove
Possible
box.
match.
The center
The
console.
first officer said.
Nothing. Marcus
He
looked
moved
up.
slower than
Match to
necessary.
what? As if buying
The first
time.
officer
As
ignored
if
him.
hoping something
You
would
fit the
stop
description.
this. The woman
Of who?
filming stepped even
Marcus
closer.
asked.
I'm
The
live
younger
streaming.
officer shifted
She said
his weight.
loudly. The
Hayes
first
stiffened.
officer spoke slowly.
Ma'am,
Step back.
black male.
No.
Mid-30s.
More
Nice
headlights.
car.
Slowed. A man
Marcus
stepped
felt
out from
heat
another vehicle.
rise in his neck.
Why is he
That's
cuffed?
not a description,
The man
he
asked.
said.
Hayes'
It is
voice
tonight.
sharpened.
Everyone
The younger
stepped back.
officer avoided eye contact.
Marcus felt something
Marcus
shift
looked at
again.
him instead.
This was no
Officer,
longer
what
quiet.
crime? This was
The first
public.
officer's
The
tone
younger
sharpened.
officer returned.
Watch your tone.
Nothing in the vehicle.
I'm asking question.
He said quietly.
And I'm telling you
Hayes
to stand
didn't
still.
respond. He just
A car
stared
stopped
at
across
Marcus.
the street.
You
A
nervous
woman
yet?
stepped out with her phone
Hayes
raised.
asked.
Marcus
Recording.
felt his
The
wrist
first
burning.
officer
I'm
noticed.
angry.
His jaw flexed.
Same thing.
You mind
No.
your business.
Marcus
Shouted toward
leaned
her.
forward slightly.
She didn't lower the phone.
Nervous as fear being
Marcus
caught.
felt the moment
Angry as
changing.
knowing you've done nothing.
Not safer.
The younger
Just
officer
louder.
looked down.
The first
Hayes'
officer
face
walked
darkened.
back to him.
A white
You got
new
anything
van
in the
turned
vehicle
onto the
I should
street.
know about?
Marcus saw the logo
No.
on the side. Mind if I
Channel
take
8.
a look?
His breath slowed.
Yes, I mind.
Faster
You have
heart.
probable cause.
Slower breath.
The younger
The van
officer
stopped.
inhaled
A
sharply.
woman stepped
The
out
first
with a microphone.
officer's eyes narrowed.
Rachel Kim.
You lawyers think you know
recognized her
everything.
instantly.
I know
She
my
recognized
rights.
him too. The
Her
rain
eyes
slowed
widened.
to a drizzle.
Is that?
But the
She
tension
began.
thickened. The
The
cameraman
first
lifted
officer
his
stepped
lens.
very close.
Hayes swore under his
Close
breath.
enough that Marcus could smell
Rachel
coffee on his
approached
breath.
carefully. You
Officer,
always got to make
what's
things
happening
difficult.
here?
Hayes
Marcus
straightened.
held eye contact.
Professional mask.
I'm not the one
sliding
escalating
on.
this.
Routine
A pause.
stop.
Heavy.
Rachel
The
looked
first
at Marcus.
officer stepped back.
In cuffs.
He spoke into
Officer
his radio
safety.
quietly.
Rachel's
Marcus couldn't
eyes
hear the
flicked to
words,
Marcus's wrist,
but he saw the glance.
They looked tight. The look. Hayes'
Not
tone
suspicion.
hardened.
Ma'am,
Decision.
The
Please step
officer
back.
turned back.
Rachel,
You know,
didn't. He
is
said
that
slowly.
Marcus Reed?
There was a
She
theft
asked clearly.
nearby.
The name landed
Marcus's
in the air.
stomach dropped.
The third
What does that
officer
have to
looked
do with
uneasy.
me?
The
The
officer's
younger
eyes
one
locked
swallowed.
onto his.
Hayes didn't
Let's see if
answer.
you're who you say you
Rachel
are.
stepped closer.
And when the third
Mr.
cruiser's
Reed,
lights
are you appeared
under
in the
arrest?
distance. Marcus met her
understood.
gaze. This wasn't about
No.
traffic. Then
It was
why
about
are you
something
restrained?
else.
And
Hayes
it was
stepped in
only
front of
getting
the camera.
started. Ma'am, you're interfering. Rachel held her ground. I'm reporting. Hayes turned back to Marcus. Stand up. Marcus stepped out of the cruiser, slowly. Cuffs still tight. The camera zoomed in. Hayes leaned close. You like attention? He muttered. I prefer justice. Hayes' face tightened. You think this ends well for you? Marcus didn't respond. Rachel raised her voice. Officer, what's the charge? Hayes finally snapped. Suspicion of theft. What theft? Rachel shot back. Hayes hesitated. Just half a second. Too long. Rachel noticed. The camera noticed. Everyone noticed. Marcus felt it. The crack in authority. Small, but real. Hayes looked at the flashing lights reflected in the wet pavement, then at Marcus, then at the growing crowd. His jaw clenched, and in a low voice only Marcus could hear. You wanted accountability? He pulled the cuffs tighter. Let's see how you handle it. The rain slid down the windshield. Marcus winced, but didn't make a sound. Marcus Reed, the camera caught hands on the wheel. Rachel Kim stepped closer. He checked the speedometer. Those 35. Exactly standard. Red and blue lights flashed cutting into his wrist. His stomach dropped. Officer pulled over carefully. Marcus signaled first. I have not resisted. Engine off. Hayes didn't look at him. Rolled the window halfway down. Hayes, cold air rushed in. For what? Boots splashed. Marcus asked. A flashlight hit his eyes. Finish what? Blinding. Hayes stepped closer. License and registration. You're not in a courtroom. The voice was flat. Marcus felt the sting in those words. Rachel raised her into his jacket. Officer Hayes. The officer Can you state repeated, the specific evidence linking Mr. Reed to a theft? His fingers felt heavy. Hayes shot her a look. He handed over You don't get to interrogate me. The officer didn't I'm asking right for clarity. Instead, he studied Marcus's shifted face. Uncomfortably. Longer than necessary. The younger officer stared at Marcus's wrist. Yes, sir. Red marks. You sure about that? The crowd grew. Marcus blinked. 5 people now. Yes. Then the officer leaned back, held high. What do you do? Man in a hoodie called out. Marcus didn't do anything. He hated Hayes turned sharply. I'm an attorney. Everyone stepped back. A small laugh. No one moved. The officer felt the energy change again. This wasn't quiet control. Marcus Reed. This was. He read slowly. Rachel turned slightly to the camera. The officer live at the car in what appears to be a disputed leather seat stop. Clean dash stepped in front of her lens. Silver watch. Turn that off. Driving suspiciously. It's public property. Marcus swallowed. Rachel replied calmly. In what way? Hayes exhaled through his nose. Hard. I wasn't. Marcus spoke. You calling me a liar? Officer. No, sir. What evidence do you have? I'm asking what I did. You matched the description. The officer's jaw said that 3 times. Step out of the vehicle. And I'll say it again. Marcus's pulse ticked. That description is vague. Am I being detained? Hayes leaned closer. I said step out. You don't decide that. Cars slowed as they Marcus felt anger. Marcus opened the door slowly, heavy, and stepped into the rain. But he kept his voice steady. Cold drops. You are escalating without cause. He kept his hands visible. Hayes' eyes narrowed. Stand by the hood. You're escalating. Marcus did. I'm standing still. Officer circled the car. The younger officer finally spoke. Intentional. Sir, Marcus maybe we should eyes on him from passing vehicles. He hated that didn't look at him. Like being I know displayed. What I'm doing. Where are you coming from? Third officer muttered. Officer asked. Dispatch hasn't confirmed anything Where's yet. That? Downtown in the air. Doing Rachel what? Caught it. Has there been confirmed theft? I'm an attorney. She asked loudly. The officer stopped walking. We're investigating. Marcus saw it clearly now. Silence. No confirmed the rain crime. Grew louder. No clear suspect. Officer's expression changed. Rain not surprised. Completely. Recognition. The silence after he said louder. Quietly. Hayes stepped back slightly. The adjusted his body cam. Officer stepped pointed closer. It straight at Marcus's Civil rights. Face. He repeated. Suing officers makes you feel powerful. Interesting. Hayes a second cruiser turned the This corner. Isn't personal. Marcus chest tightened. I didn't call for he began. There it was. The officer cut off. Unfiltered routine. Rachel the second car parked behind the first. Another suggesting the stop is related to Mr. Reed's legal watching carefully. Hayes turned toward her sharply. The younger I suggest asked. You step back. Possible match. The crowd. The first officer said. The younger Marcus looked swallowed. Match sir. What? He said quietly. The first Hayes. Officer ignored him. Getting messy. You fit the description. Hayes shot him a look. Of who? You questioning me? Marcus asked. No, sir. The younger Marcus felt the weight of that exchange. The first officer spoke slowly. Fear. Blackmail. You recognized it. Nice seen it in depositions. Marcus officers who knew rise in his neck. That's not a description. He said. Hayes faced Marcus tonight. You think the younger officer avoided eye contact? They saved the Marcus truth. Looked at him instead. Hayes stepped in close. Officer, what crime? So let's talk truth. The first officer's tone raised his voice. Watch your Mr. Tone. Reed. I'm asking Were you near Brookside Market and I'm telling you to stand still. You sure? A car stopped across the street. A woman stepped out with her phone raised. I was driving home. The first officer noticed. Yes. His jaw flexed. Hayes nodded Mind slowly. Your business. Convenient. He shouted toward her. Rachel jumped low the phone. Officer. Marcus felt the moment change. Linking him there? Not safer. Hayes didn't answer. Just louder. Marcus saw it first again. First officer walked back to him. You got anything in the vehicle I should know about? The third officer checked his radio Mind again. If I take a look? Dispatch says yes, suspect fled on foot. Do you have probable cause? He said quietly. The
Hayes
younger
didn't
officer
respond
inhaled
immediately.
sharply. Marcus
The first
heard it clearly.
officer's eyes
On
narrowed.
foot. You lawyers
Marcus
think you know
repeated.
everything. The crowd
I
stirred.
know my rights.
Rachel looked directly
The rain
at Hayes.
slowed to a
Then
drizzle.
why stop a
But the
man
tension
driving
thickened.
alone in a registered
The first
vehicle?
officer stepped
Hayes'
very
face
close.
hardened. You don't
Close
close enough
scene.
that Marcus could
Rachel
smell
didn't
coffee
blink.
on his breath.
No,
You always
but
got
I
to
will
make things
report it.
difficult. Marcus
held
held
eye
eye
contact.
inside him. I'm
Not
not the
fear.
one escalating.
Not
this. Anger. A
Clarity.
pause. This
Heavy.
wasn't about
The
theft.
first
It was
officer
about
stepped back.
control. He
and
spoke
Hayes
into
was
his radio
losing it.
quietly.
Sirens
Marcus
sounded in
couldn't hear the
distance.
words. Different
But
tone.
he saw the glance.
Different vehicle.
The look.
The crowd
Not
parted
suspicion.
slightly.
Decision.
A black SUV
The
approached.
officer turned back.
Unmarked. You
and
know.
stopped behind
He said
cruisers.
slowly. There was
The
a
driver's
theft door
nearby.
opened slowly.
A
Marcus's
tall
stomach
figure
dropped
dropped.
out. What does
Sharp
that have to do
uniform.
with me? Gold
The
and
officer's
insignia.
eyes locked
The
onto
younger
his.
officer
Let's
straightened
see if you're who you say
instantly.
you are.
The third
And when the
officer
third
stepped
cruiser's
back,
lights appeared
Hayes
in the
froze
distance
for half a second.
Marcus understood.
Marcus felt his
This wasn't
pulse
about
quicken.
traffic.
The
It
police
was about
chief,
something else.
standing in
And
the rain
it was
damp
only
street,
getting started.
watching everything. Rachel whispered, almost to herself, "This just got bigger." The chief walked forward calmly, surveyed the crowd, the cameras, Marcus in cuffs, then Hayes. His voice was quiet, controlled. "Officer Hayes." A pause. "Explain." And for the first time that night, Hayes looked uncertain. The chief stopped a few feet from Marcus. Rainwater shimmered on the pavement. The flashing lights painted everything red and blue. "Officer Hayes," the chief repeated calmly. "Why is this man in cuffs?" Hayes straightened. "Suspicion of theft, sir." "What theft?" "Brookside Market." The chief glanced at the third officer. "Confirmed." The third officer hesitated. "Dispatch says suspect fled on foot." Silence. The crowd leaned in. Rachel kept the camera steady. The chief's eyes moved to Marcus's wrists. They looked tight. Marcus didn't speak. He held the chief's gaze. The chief turned back to Hayes. "Evidence." "He matches a description." "Which is?" Hayes paused. "Black male, mid-30s. The words sounded smaller now. The chief's voice stayed even. "That's it." "Nice vehicle," Hayes added. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Rachel said clearly, "So the suspect fled on foot, and you stopped a man driving alone." Hayes' jaw clenched. The chief's eyes sharpened. "Officer Hayes, remove the cuffs." Hayes didn't move. "Sir, I was conducting." "Remove the cuffs." The command was not loud, but it carried weight. Hayes stepped behind Marcus. The metal clicked. Cold air hit Marcus's wrists. Blood rushed back into his hands. He lowered his arms slowly, didn't rub them, didn't show pain. The chief looked at Marcus. "Mr. Reed, are you injured?" "No, sir." "Were you informed of the reason for your detention?" Marcus paused. "I was told I fit." The chief's jaw tightened. Rachel spoke up. "Chief, we are live. Would you like to comment?" The chief took a breath. "This matter will be reviewed." Hayes shifted. "Sir, he's filed lawsuits against the department." The words slipped out. Too fast. The crowd reacted. The chief's eyes moved slowly toward Hayes. "And that's relevant how?" Hayes faltered. "He targets officers." Marcus spoke quietly. "I represent citizens." Hayes snapped, "Citizens who hate us." "That's not true," Marcus replied evenly. The younger officer finally stepped forward. "Sir," he said to the chief, "there was no confirmed description beyond race and age." Hayes shot him a glare. The chief noticed. "Is that correct?" the chief asked. The younger officer nodded once. "Yes, sir." Another silence. Heavy. The chief looked at Hayes. "Did you request backup?" "Yes." "For what reason?" "Officer safety." The chief scanned the scene. Marcus standing calmly. No weapon, no aggression, just rain and cameras. "From what?" the chief asked quietly. Hayes didn't answer. Rachel spoke softly but clearly. "Chief, viewers are asking why Mr. Reed was restrained if he was cooperative." The chief nodded once. "Officer Hayes," he said, voice firm now, "step aside." Hayes hesitated. "Now." Hayes stepped back. The chief moved closer to Marcus, lowered his voice slightly. "Mr. Reed, do you wish to file a complaint?" The question hung between them. Marcus felt every eye on him. The crowd, the officers, the camera. His wrist still stung. His chest felt tight. He thought of past clients. of men who had no camera, no chief, no witnesses. He answered carefully, "I want accountability." The chief nodded slowly. "You'll have it." Hayes scoffed under his breath. The chief turned sharply. "Officer Hayes, that's enough." Hayes stared straight ahead, jaw tight. The chief addressed the crowd. "This stop is concluded. Mr. Reed is free to leave." No applause, no cheering, just quiet tension. Marcus stepped back toward his car. His door was still open. Rain had dampened the seat. He turned to the chief. "Sir," he said calmly, "this isn't isolated." The chief studied him. "I'm aware." Rachel lowered her microphone slightly. "Will Officer Hayes face review?" The chief answered without looking away from Marcus. "Yes." Hayes' head snapped slightly. "Sir." "Yes," the chief repeated. The younger officer exhaled softly. The third officer looked relieved. But Hayes stood rigid, his pride cut deeper than the cuffs ever had. Marcus opened his car door, paused, then turned back once more. "Chief," he said, voice steady. This was retaliation. Hayes stepped forward sharply. "That's a lie." Marcus met his eyes. "You said it was personal." The crowd murmured again. Rachel caught every second. The chief's expression changed. "Is that true?" he asked Hayes quietly. Hayes didn't answer immediately. And that pause, that single fatal pause, said more than words. The chief nodded once. "Officer Hayes, you are relieved of duty pending internal review." The words fell like a gavel. Hayes stiffened. "Sir, turn in your badge." The street went silent. Even the crowd stopped whispering. Hayes looked around, at the cameras, at Marcus, at the officers who weren't defending him. Slowly, reluctantly, he unclipped his badge, and for the first time that night, he looked small. By morning, stopped a few feet
video
from
was
Marcus.
Everywhere.
Rainwater
Marcus
shimmered
didn't
on
need
the
to check.
pavement.
His
The
phone
flashing
told him.
lights painted
It vibrated
everything
nonstop
red-and-blue
on the
Officer
nightstand.
Hayes, he stared at
The
the
chief
ceiling
repeated
for a
calmly,
long moment.
"Why
before
is this
picking
man
it
in
up.
cuffs?"
Dozens of
Hayes
notifications.
straightened.
Missed
Suspicion
calls,
of theft, sir.
text messages.
What theft?
News alerts.
Brookside
Rachel's
Market.
live report at
The
the
chief
already
glanced
glanced
at
at
the
the third
million
officer.
views.
Confirmed.
The headline was simple.
The third
Attorney
officer
handcuffed
hesitated.
during questionable
Dispatch
stop.
says suspect fled on
Marcus
foot.
sat up slowly.
Silence.
His wrists were
The crowd
bruised.
leaned in. Dark
Rachel
lines
kept the
circling
camera
bone.
steady.
He
The
touched
chief's
them lightly.
eyes moved to
They
Marcus's
still hurt.
wrists.
His
They
phone
looked
rang again.
tight.
Unknown
Marcus
number.
didn't speak.
He let go to
He held the
voicemail.
chief's gaze.
Another text
The
came
chief
in.
turned back to
You
Hayes.
deserved it.
Evidence.
Then another. He matches the
suing
description
cops
and see what happens.
which is
Marcus
Hayes
swallowed.
paused.
He
Blackmail.
expected backlash.
Mid-30s.
He didn't expect it to
The
feel
words
so
sounded
personal.
smaller now.
His phone rang
The
again.
chief's voice
This
stayed
time it was
even.
Alvarez.
That's it.
Have you
Nice
seen it?
vehicle.
Hayes
Alvarez
added.
asked immediately.
A murmur rippling
Yes.
through the crowd.
It's
Rachel
everywhere.
said clearly,
National pickup.
So the suspect fled on
Marcus
foot,
walked to the
and he
kitchen
stopped the
window.
man driving
Rain
alone.
again.
Same
Hayes'
road,
jaw clenched.
different morning.
The chief's eyes
Internal
sharpened.
Affairs opened an
Officer
investigation.
Hayes removed the
Alvarez
cuffs.
continued.
Hayes
The
didn't
chief
move.
had no choice.
Sir, I was conducting.
Marcus leaned against
Remove
the counter.
the cuffs.
Choice.
He
The
repeated
command was
quietly.
not loud.
You
But
okay?
it carried weight.
Alvarez
Hayes
asked.
stepped behind
A
Marcus.
pause.
The metal
Yes.
clicked.
That was a
Cold
lie.
air hit Marcus's
But it was
wrist.
easier.
Blood.
Alvarez lowered
rushed
his
back
voice.
into his hands.
Hayes
He lowered his
friends in the
arms
department.
slowly.
I
Didn't rub
know.
them.
Didn't show
You
pain.
need to be careful.
The chief looked at Marcus.
Marcus looked down at his
Mr.
wrist
Reed, are you
again.
injured?
Careful is how this
No,
started.
sir.
Were
A
you
knock came
informed
at
of
his
the reason
door.
for your detention?
Sharp.
Unexpected.
Marcus paused.
Marcus
I was
froze.
told I fit.
Another knock.
The chief's
He
jaw
walked
tightened.
slowly toward it.
Rachel spoke
Check the
up.
peephole.
Chief, we're
Rachel
alive.
Kim, would you like
Alone.
to comment? He opened the door
The chief
slightly.
took a breath.
Can I
This
come in?
matter
She
will be
asked.
reviewed.
Marcus hesitated.
Hayes shifted.
Then nodded.
Sir,
She
he's
stepped
filed
inside.
lawsuits against the
Professional
department.
but softer than
The
last
words
night.
slipped out.
I won't
Too
stay
fast,
long.
she
The
said.
crowd reacted.
He closed the
The
door
chief's
behind
eyes
her.
moved slowly
They're
toward
reviewing
Hayes.
body cam footage.
And that's relevant,
She
how?
continued.
It
Hayes
confirms
faltered.
everything.
He targets officers.
Marcus didn't look surprised.
Marcus spoke
He said it was
quietly.
personal.
I represent
Rachel
citizens.
added.
I know.
Hayes snapped.
He adjusted his
Citizens
body
would hate
cam
us.
before tightening the cuffs.
That's not true.
Marcus
felt
replied
that
evenly.
again.
The
The
younger
quiet
officer
cruelty.
finally stepped
Is he
forward.
suspended?
Sir, he said to the
Marcus
chief.
asked.
There was no
Administrative
confirmed description
leave
beyond race
she
and
said
age.
carefully.
Hayes
Hey.
shot him a glare.
Yes.
The chief noticed.
Marcus let out
Is
a
that
slow
correct?
breath. The chief
Of
asked.
course.
The younger
Rachel
officer
studied him.
nodded once.
You okay? Yes, sir.
He gave the same
Another
answer.
silence.
Yes.
Heavy.
She
The
didn't
chief
believe
looked
in
at
Hayes.
Hayes.
They're
Did you request
digging into
backup?
his record.
Yes.
She said. There are
For what
rumors.
reason?
Officer
What kind?
safety.
Similar
Chief
stops.
scanned the scene.
No cameras.
Marcus standing calmly.
Marcus felt his
No
jaw
weapon.
tighten.
No
How many?
aggression. 3
Just rain
complaints
and cameras.
last year. From
None
what?
sustained.
The chief asked quietly.
Silence filled the room.
Hayes didn't answer.
Marcus walked
Rachel
back to the
spoke
window.
softly,
Without
clearly.
video,
Chief,
Rachel added softly.
viewers are asking
It's
why
just
Mr. Reed
stories.
was restrained if he was
He turned
cooperative.
toward her.
The
That's
chief
the
nodded
problem.
once.
She
Officer
nodded.
Hayes, he said,
There's
voice
something
firm
else.
now. Step aside.
Marcus waited.
Hayes hesitated.
The city council
now
is calling an emergency
Hayes stepped
session
back.
tonight.
The chief
For
moved
what?
closer to Marcus
To address
lowered
community
his voice
trust.
slightly.
Marcus
Mr. Reed
almost smiled.
You wish to file a
They
complaint?
found that phrase quickly.
The question hung
Rachel
between them.
allowed a faint smile.
Marcus felt
They're
every
also
eye on
discussing
him.
a civilian
The crowd,
oversight board.
The officers.
Marcus
the
stared
camera.
at her.
His
That's
wrist
been
still
stalled
stung.
for years.
His chest felt tight.
Not anymore.
He thought of past clients.
His phone buzzed
of
again.
men who had no
Another
camera.
unknown number.
No chief.
He ignored
no
it.
witnesses.
Rachel hesitated.
He answered
They
carefully.
might ask you to
I
speak.
want accountability. Marcus looked
The
at her
chief
sharply.
nodded slowly.
I was in cuffs
You
12
have
hours
it.
ago. Hayes scoffed
Exactly.
under breath. He
The
walked
chief
past her
turned
toward the
sharply.
sink.
Officer
Turn on the
Hayes,
water.
that's enough.
Watched it run.
Hayes stared
Clear.
straight ahead.
Steady.
Jaw tight.
He turned it
The
off.
chief addressed the crowd.
Exposure doesn't
This stop
equal
is
justice.
concluded. He said
Mr. Reed
quietly.
is free
No.
to leave. Rachel agreed.
No applause.
But it starts
No
pressure.
cheering.
His
Just
phone
quiet
buzzed
tension.
again. This
Marcus
time it was
stepped
the
back
chief.
toward his car.
Marcus
His
stared at
door
the
was
name.
still open.
Rachel
Rain
noticed.
had dampened the
You going to
scene.
answer?
He turned to the
He
chief.
hesitated.
Sir,
Then press accept.
he said calmly.
Mr. Reed,
This isn't isolated.
the chief said calmly.
The chief studied
I'd
him.
like to meet.
I'm aware.
When
Rachel
Today.
lowered her microphone slightly.
Marcus looked at
Will
Rachel.
Officer Hayes
She
face
raised an
review?
eyebrow.
The chief
Why?
answered without looking
Marcus
away from
asked.
Marcus. Because what
Yes.
happened last night raised
Hayes' head
questions.
snapped slightly.
The chief said,
Sir,
about Officer
Yes.
Hayes?
the chief repeated.
About the department.
The younger officer
Marcus
exhaled
felt the weight of
softly.
that.
The
I'm not
third
interested
officer
in
looked
optics.
relieved.
He
But
said,
Hayes stood
"Good."
rigid.
His
The chief
pride
replied,
cut deep in
Neither
the
am
cuffs
I.
ever had.
A pause.
Marcus opened his car
Will you
door.
come?
Pause.
Marcus thought
Then
about the
turned
threats.
back once more.
The bruises.
Chief,
he
the
said,
silence
voice from
steady.
years past.
This was retaliation.
Yes. He said
Hayes
finally,
stepped forward sharply.
After he hung up,
That's a lie.
Rachel studied him. Marcus met
You're
his
stepping
eyes.
into something bigger.
He said it was personal.
Marcus nodded
The
slowly.
crowd murmured
It
again.
was already
Rachel
bigger.
caught every
She
second.
moved
The
toward
chief's
the door.
expression changed.
I'll cover the council
Is
meeting.
that true?
He
He
walked
asked
her
her
out.
quietly.
When the door
Hayes
closed,
didn't answer immediately.
the house felt too
In that
quiet.
pause, his phone
That single,
buzzed again.
fatal pause.
This time it
said
said
more
more
than
than
words.
From an
The
unknown
chief nodded
sender.
once.
A photo.
Officer Hayes,
His car.
You are
Parked
relieved of
outside
duty
his
pending
house.
internal review.
Taken recently.
The words
Under
fell
it,
like a gavel.
Just
Hayes
3
stiffened.
words. Sir, stay in your lane.
Turn in your badge.
Marcus felt cold
The street
spread through his
went
chest.
silent. Not
Even the
fear.
crowd stopped
Not
whispering.
yet.
But
Hayes
warning.
looked around.
He stepped
At
to
the
window.
cameras.
Looked
At
outside.
Marcus.
Nothing
At the
unusual.
officers who weren't
Just a
defending
quiet
him.
street. Slowly,
Calm.
reluctantly.
Too calm.
He unclipped
And for
his
the
badge.
first time since the
And
cuffs
for the
came
first
off,
time that night,
Marcus
he looked
realized this
small.
was an ending.
It was escalating.
The
City
chief
Hall
stopped
felt
a few
colder
feet
than
from
the street
Marcus.
had.
Rainwater
Rainwater
shimmered
shimmered
on
on
the
the long
pavement.
wooden table.
The flashing
Microphone
lights
in front of
painted
him.
everything
Water
red and
glass
blue.
untouched.
Officer
The
Hayes.
chamber was full.
The chief
Community
repeated calmly.
members. Why is this man in
Officers.
cuffs?
Press.
Hayes
Rachel
straightened.
stood near the back
Suspicion
with
of
the crew.
theft, sir.
The oversight
What
committee
theft?
sat elevated.
Brookside
5
Market.
members.
The chief
Face
glanced at the
serious.
third officer.
Officer Hayes sat
Confirmed.
across the room.
The third
Uniformed
officer
Chris.
hesitated.
Expression
Dispatch
tight.
says
Badge
suspect fled on
absent.
foot. Marcus
Silence.
noticed that first.
The crowd
The
leaned
absence.
in. Rachel
The
kept
chair
the
of the
committee
steady.
leaned forward.
The chief's
This
eyes
hearing
moved to
addresses a
Marcus's
stop
wrist,
involving
They
Mr.
looked
Marcus
tight.
Reed.
Marcus
The
didn't
room
speak.
quieted.
He held
Officer
the chief's
Hayes,
gaze. You may begin.
The chief turned back
Hayes
to
stood
Hayes.
slowly.
Evidence.
Smooth as
He
uniform.
matches a description.
I conducted a lawful
which is-
stop based on matching
Hayes
description
paused.
and
Blackmail.
officer safety concerns.
Mid-30s.
His voice
The
was
words
controlled,
sounded smaller
polished.
now. The
No
chief's
anger
voice
now.
stayed even.
No coffee
That's
breath.
it.
Just
Nice
careful
vehicle,
words.
Hayes added.
Marcus watched
A
him
murmur
closely.
rippled through the crowd.
Hayes continued.
Rachel said
The
clearly.
situation escalated
So the suspect
due to
fled on
non-compliance, and you stopped a man
Marcus's
driving
jaw
alone.
tightened.
Hayes' jaw
Non-compliance.
clenched. The chief's
the word
eyes
landed
sharpened.
like a lie.
Officer
dresses
Hayes,
policy.
remove the
The
cuffs.
chair turned to Marcus.
Hayes didn't move.
Mr. Reed,
Sir,
your
I was
response?
conducting. Marcus
Remove.
stood. Hands
Cuffs.
steady.
The
Voice
command
calm.
was not loud.
I complied
but
with
it carried
every
weight.
instruction. Hayes stepped
He
behind
paused.
Marcus.
I asked
The
questions.
metal clicked.
A
Cold
small
air hit
murmur
Marcus's
spread.
wrists.
Hayes looked
Blood
straight ahead.
rushed
I was
back into his
cooperative.
hands.
I kept
He
my
lowered
hands
his arms
visible.
slowly.
I identified
Didn't rub
myself.
them. Didn't show pain.
Marcus met the committee's
The chief
eyes.
looked at Marcus.
I was cuffed without
Mr.
charge.
Reed, are you injured?
Short silence.
No, sir.
The chair
Were
nodded.
you informed of the
We will
reason
now
Now
your
review
attention.
body camera footage.
Marcus paused.
The screen
I was told
lowered
I
behind
fit.
him. The video
Chief's
played.
jaw tightened.
Rain. Rachel
Flashing
flashing
lights.
Chief, we're
Hayes'
live.
voice saying,
Would you like to comment?
People always got a question.
The chief took a breath. The room
This matter will be
stiffened.
reviewed.
Hayes shifted in his seat.
Hayes shifted.
The footage
Sir,
continued. He's
Marcus
filed
asking
lawsuits against the
calmly.
department.
What crime?
The words slipped out.
Hayes replied,
Too fast.
Because I
The crowd
can.
reacted. That
The
line's
chief's
eyes
echoed
moved
through the
slowly
chamber.
toward Hayes.
Hayes' face
And that's
tightened.
relevant how?
The younger officer
Hayes
appeared on
faltered.
screen.
He
Hesitant,
targets officers,
softly saying,
Marcus spoke quietly.
"Dispatch hasn't
I
confirmed
represent
anything
citizens.
yet." The room
Hayes
grew
snapped
still.
Citizens
The
who hate
footage
us.
ended.
The chair
"That's not
leaned
true."
forward. Marcus
Officer
replied
Hayes.
evenly.
The
Do you
younger
dispute this
officer
recording?
finally stepped
Hayes
forward.
cleared his throat.
"Sir," he said
I
to
was
the
under
chief.
stress.
There was no confirmed
That is not the
description
question.
beyond race and age.
Hayes hesitated.
Hayes shot him a glare.
No.
The
The
chief
chair
noticed.
nodded once.
"Is that
You
correct?"
stated
The chief
earlier
asked.
this was
The
non-compliance.
younger officer
Yes.
nodded once.
Point
"Yes,
to it.
sir."
Hayes paused.
Another silence.
Too long.
Heavy.
Marcus
The chief
felt the
looked at
shift.
Hayes.
Small.
"Did you request
but
backup?"
real. Hayes tried
Yes.
again. He
"For
challenged
what
authority.
reason?" Officer
Marcus
safety.
leaned toward the
The
microphone.
chief scanned the scene.
Is
asking
Marcus
what crime.
standing calmly.
Now resistance.
No weapon.
Silence.
No aggression.
The chair
Just
turned to the
rain
younger
and
officer.
cameras.
"You were
From
present?"
what?
Yes.
The chief asked quietly.
Was Mr. Reed
Hayes didn't
resisting?
answer. The
Rachel
younger
spoke
officer
softly,
swallowed.
but clearly.
The entire
"Chief,
room watched him.
Viewers are
No,
asking why
he said
Mr. Reed
quietly.
was restrained.
Hayes
and
looked
was
at him
cooperative.
sharply.
The
The
younger
chief nodded
officer
once.
didn't look back.
Officer Hayes,
The chair
he said,
nodded.
voice firm now.
Officer
Step
Hayes.
aside.
Did you
Hayes
reference Mr.
hesitated.
Reed's legal actions
Now.
during the stop?
Hayes stepped
Hayes
back.
stiffened. The chief
I
moved
may have.
closer to Marcus.
Why?
Lowered his voice slightly.
Hayes struggled.
Mr. Reed.
It was relevant
Do
context.
you wish to file a complaint?
For a theft
The
investigation?
question hung between them.
No answer.
Marcus felt every eye
felt
on
his
him.
pulse in his
The
throat.
crowd.
The chair
The
spoke
officers.
calmly.
The
This
camera.
suggests personal
His
bias.
wrist still stung.
Hayes
His
snapped
chest felt
slightly.
tight. It
He thought
suggests
past
pattern
clients.
recognition of men who had
Explain.
no camera.
No
Individuals
chief.
who antagonize
No
police
witnesses.
often create
He
hostile
answered
encounters.
carefully. I want
Marcus
accountability.
leaned forward. The
I
chief
antagonized
antagonized misconduct.
You'll have it.
The chair
Hayes
raised
scoffed
a
under
hand.
his breath.
Enough.
The chief turned
Another
sharply.
committee member spoke.
Officer Hayes.
Officer
that's enough.
Hayes.
Hayes
Are you aware
stared
of
straight
3
ahead.
prior complaints
Jaw
filed
tight.
against you? The chief
Hayes
addressed the
froze.
crowd.
Yes.
This stop is concluded.
2 involved vague
Mr. Reed
descriptions.
is free to leave.
Hayes shifted.
No
They were
applause.
unfounded.
No cheering.
Because
just quiet
lack of
tension.
evidence.
Marcus stepped
Marcus
back
felt
toward
the
his
weight
car.
of that.
His
Lack of
door was
cameras.
still open.
Lack of
Rain
witnesses.
had dampened the seat.
The committee member
turned
looked
to
at
the chief.
Marcus.
Sir,
Mr. Reed,
he said calmly,
what would have happened
this
without
isn't
cameras?
isolated. Marcus
chief
answered
studied him.
honestly.
I'm
I would
aware.
have been alone. Rachel
The
lowered her
room absorbed
microphone
that.
slightly.
Rachel's
Will
camera
Officer
zoomed in
Hayes
slightly.
face review?
The chair
The
folded
chief
her hands.
answered without looking
Officer
away from
Hayes.
Marcus. Your conduct
Yes.
appears retaliatory.
Hayes' head snapped slightly.
Hayes' voice sharpened.
Sir,
That's an accusation. The chief
It's a
repeated.
finding.
The younger
The word
officer
hit hard.
exhaled softly.
Finding.
The third
Formal.
officer looked relieved.
Documented.
But
Hayes
Hayes
stood
looked around
rigid.
the room. His
No one
pride
defended
cut
him.
deeper than the cuffs
Not the third
ever had.
officer.
Marcus
Not the
opened
younger
the car
one.
door.
Not the
Paused.
chief.
Then
Seated
turned back
quietly
once
near
more.
the wall.
Chief, the chair
he said,
spoke
voice
again.
steady.
This board
This
will
was
now vote
retaliation.
on disciplinary
Hayes
action.
stepped forward
The
sharply.
room seemed
That's
to
a
hold
lie.
its breath.
Marcus
Marcus
met
sat
his
down
eyes.
slowly. You said it
His
was
heart
personal.
pounded.
The
Not from
crowd
fear.
murmured again.
From memory.
Rachel caught
From
every
every
client
second.
who never
The chief's
reached
expression
this table.
changed.
The votes
Is that
were called
true?
one by one.
He asked Hayes quietly.
Suspension without
Hayes
pay.
didn't answer immediately.
Yes. And that pause,
Yes.
that
Yes.
single fatal pause,
Yes.
said more than
Mandatory
words.
bias
The
training.
chief nodded
Review
once.
of prior stops.
Officer Hayes,
Unanimous.
you are relieved of duty.
The gavel
pending
struck
internal
once.
review. The sound
The words
echoed.
fell like a gavel.
Hayes stood abruptly.
Hayes stiffened.
This is
Sir,
political, he muttered.
turn in your badge.
No one responded. The street
chief went
remained
silent.
still. Even the crowd
Hayes
stopped
turned
whispering.
toward Marcus.
Hayes looked
Eyes
around.
hard.
At the
This isn't
cameras.
over.
At
Marcus
Marcus
held his gaze.
At the officers
It
who
never
weren't
was.
defending him.
Hayes
Slowly,
walked out.
reluctantly, the door
He
shut
unclipped
firmly
his badge.
behind him. And
The
for the
room
first time that
exhaled.
night, the
He
chair
looked
addressed
small.
Marcus. This board will also recommend formal policy, reform regarding vague suspect descriptions. Marcus nodded slowly. Small progress. Real, but small. Rachel approached as people began standing. How do you feel? She asked. Marcus searched for the right word. Tired. She nodded. That makes sense. He looked around the chamber. The same building. The same city. Different energy. But the bruise on his wrist still dark. The threat still in his phone. The tension still present. Justice had moved, but it hadn't erased. And as Marcus stepped outside City Hall, he saw someone leaning against a car across the street, watching him. Not Hayes. Someone else. Unknown. Phone in hand. Not recording. Just staring. And when Marcus met his eyes, the man didn't look away. The man
chief
across
stopped
the
a few
street
feet from
didn't
Marcus.
wave. Rainwater
smile.
shimmered on
He
the
just
pavement.
watched.
The flashing
Marcus
lights
slowed his
painted
steps.
everything red
Rachel
and blue.
was still beside him.
Officer Hayes,
Do you know him?
The chief
She asked
repeated
quietly.
calmly.
No.
Why is this man in cuffs?
The man pushed off the car.
Hayes straightened,
got inside.
Suspicion of theft,
Drove
sir.
away without turning
What
his headlights
theft?
on.
Marcus felt the chill settle in. The chief glanced at the third consequences. Confirmed. Sometimes quiet the third officer inside City Hall. Dispatched. People were still talking. Fled on foot. Reporters gathering quotes. The crowd leaned committee in. Members. Rachel kept the camera steady. But outside, the chief's eyes fell on Marcus's wrists. Rachel steadied him. Tight. You're gonna have attention. Marcus didn't speak. I already Chief's gaze. More. The chief turned back. Marcus nodded once. Evidence. He walked toward his car. Matches the description. Every movement felt heavier. Not Hayes paused. Just blackmail. His phone buzzed again. Another message sounded smaller. Unknown number. The chief's voice made it worse. Even. He deleted it without responding. Nice vehicle. Hayes Rachel noticed. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Yes. Rachel said clearly. You need security? So the suspect Marcus fled on foot. Almost smiled. And you stopped a man driving alone. Walking home. Hayes' jaw clenched. For being visible. The chief's he didn't answer that. Officer Hayes stepped out of the building. Remove the cuff. Mr. Reed. Hayes didn't move. Marcus turned. Sir, I was conducting. The chief approached calmly. Remove. Today was necessary. Cuffs. The chief command was not loud. Marcus met his eyes, but it carried weight. It was Hayes stepped behind Marcus. The chief nodded. Metal clicked. I won't pretend cold air hit Marcus's wrists. It doesn't. Blood rushed we are drafting policy changes. He lowered his arms slowly. Didn't rub them. Didn't show pain. The chief studied him carefully. The chief looked at Marcus. There's something else. Mr. Reed, are you Marcus injured? Waited. The council voted this afternoon. Were you informed of the reason for what? Detention? A civilian Marcus oversight board. I was told Marcus blinked. The chief's jaw tightened. Rachel spoke up. Chief's voice lowered slightly. Would you like to comment? They want you to chair it. The chief took a breath. The air shifted. This matter will be reviewed. Rachel's eyebrows shifted. Sir, Marcus felt his pulse. He's filed lawsuits against the department. He thought about the words slipped out. The rain. Too fast. Hayes' voice crowd reacted. The chief's eyes moved slowly toward Hayes. Unseen. And that's relevant how? Unheard. Hayes back at the chief. He targets officers. Because you understand both sides. I represent Marcus citizens. Almost laughed. Hayes I understand one side. Citizens who hate us. That's not true. Rachel stepped back slightly. The younger officer finally Marcus looked down at his wrist. Sir, he said to the bruises had darkened. There was no confirmed description beyond race and age. Marcus said quietly. Hayes shot They already are. The chief replied. Is that correct? The traffic moved normally. The younger officer no flashing lights. Yes, no crowd. Just another silence. If I say yes, the chief looked at Hayes. Marcus asked, did you request backup? What changes? Yes. The chief didn't hesitate. For what reason? Transparency. Officer safety. And if I say no, scan the scene. Nothing changes. Marcus standing calmly. The simplicity of that answer. No aggression. Just Marcus looked across the street. From a man who had watched him was the chief asked quietly. But the feeling Hayes didn't answer. Rachel spoke softly, always somewhere. But clearly, Rachel spoke softly. Viewers are asking why Mr. Reed what happens next. If he was cooperative. Marcus took a slow breath. Nodded once. What raises Officer Hayes, he said quietly, voice firm now. Step aside. Is how often Hayes this happens without cameras. Now, the chief Hayes stepped back. That's why we need chief moved closer to Marcus. Marcus thought lowered about his voice slightly. The hesitation. Mr. Reed. The choice you wish to file a complaint? That mattered. The question small cracks in a larger Marcus felt I'll consider him. The crowd. Marcus said finally. The officer. The chief extended his hand. His wrist still Marcus hesitated. His chest felt tight before shaking. Thought a past client. The handshake felt men who had no camera. Real. No Rachel chief. Stepped forward again. No witnesses. One last question for viewers. I want accountability. Marcus turned toward the camera. Slowly. The red recording light blinked. Hayes scoffed. Do you feel justice was served? The chief turned. Marcus looked into the lens. Officer Hayes. He thought about Hayes losing his stared straight ahead. About suspension. Jaw tight. About chief addressed the crowd. Then he thought about his concluded. The Mr. Reed's car is free to leave. The message. No applause. He answered honestly. Just quiet tension. Marcus stepped back toward his car. But just as moving and just as arriving are not the same. Rain had dampened the seat. Rachel held the camera. Turned to the chief. Marcus continued. He said calmly, this wasn't about me. This isn't isolated. It was about pattern. The chief It was about what happens I'm aware. Authority goes unchecked. Rachel lowered her microphone. His voice stayed calm. Well, but Officer Hayes carried weight. If cameras weren't there without looking away from Marcus, I would have just been another story no one believed. Hayes' head snapped. Silence followed. Sir, even the city noise felt distant. Rachel lowered the microphone. The younger officer exhaled softly. She said. The third Marcus walked toward his car again. But Hayes this time, no one stopped. He got inside. Ever had. Closed the door. Marcus opened his car door. The same road stretched ahead. Turned back once more. Rain clouds gathered again in the distance. Voice steady. He started the engine. Retaliation. Pulled onto the street. Stepped forward, driving the same speed. That's a lie. Same posture. Marcus met his eyes. 10 and 2. You said it was personal. Halfway home, the crowd and blue lights flashed in a Rachel caught every second. Not behind him. The chief's across the intersection. Is that true? Another driver. Marcus didn't answer immediately. Just slightly. And that pause. He watched as an officer approached the fatal vehicle. Different
said
officer.
more than words.
Different night.
The chief
But
nodded.
The posture
once.
looked familiar.
Officer Hayes.
He felt something
You
tighten
are
in
relieved
his
of duty
chest.
pending internal
The system
review.
had shifted. The
But
words
it hadn't
felt like
transformed.
Hayes
He
drove
drove
on.
on.
Sir,
Rain began again.
turn in your badge.
Soft at first.
The street
Then steady.
went silent.
As he
Even
turned
the
onto the
crowd
street,
stopped whispering.
his phone
Hayes
buzzed
looked
once
around.
more.
At the
This
cameras,
time, a
at voicemail
Marcus,
notification.
at the officers who
unknown
were
number.
defending him.
He hesitated
Slowly,
before pressing
reluctantly,
play.
He
A
unclipped his
distorted
badge,
voice came through.
and for the first time
No.
that night,
Calm.
he looked
You
small.
like cameras, right? Marcus's grip tightened on the wheel. The voice continued. Let's see how you handle them when they're not on your side. The message ended. Silence filled the car. Rain tapped the windshield. Marcus stared ahead. Justice had moved, but questions remained, and some of them were just beginning.